Good morning from Vietnam, Haresh. Thanks a lot for spending your morning out of your busy schedule to join our insight sharing and share your stories with our global audience. And on behalf of the listeners around the world, I want to say thank you.
Thanks for having me, huh? It's great to be here.
And I, as I said earlier, the next time you or your family travel to this country, please let us know. We would love to have a cup of coffee or dinner at my home, and please accept our invitation. Okay.
Thank you very much. I will take you up on that for sure.
Whereas in our country, it is an honor if we can have you to introduce a little bit about you and the works that you do. Would you do that for us?
Sure. So my name's Haresh Khoobchandani. I'm Singaporean. I was born in Malaysia, and right after birth came to Singapore. So Singapore's home for me. I grew up here, and I did all the things that Singaporeans do. And I have been now working for more than 30 years. I have had a pretty disruptive career, and I started my career as a flight steward with Singapore Airlines, and I did that for a short bit, about a year and a half. And right after that, realized that that's not what I want to do. I started my own business, sold it, and then I ended up joining a retail organization, and I ran a multi chain store operations, built a business model that got exposed me to the technology vendors, then went into distribution. And then one day I got a call from Microsoft saying, hey, come join us to run their consumer business, which I did. And that started a 19-year career for me at Microsoft, which I'm incredibly grateful for. I'm biased, and I think it's one of the greatest companies in the world. And right after that, after 19 years, I needed to change. And that's where I ended up with Autodesk. And I've been in Autodesk for the last 5 years, responsible for the Asia Pacific and Japan business for the company. And I've spent a lot of my time in the last 30 plus years running businesses across Asia, including Japan, Australia, India, Korea, China, ASEAN. And and it's been incredible, the kind of learnings you have and the kind of transitions that I've witnessed along the way. APAC is obviously not a very homogeneous region, as you can imagine, right? It's just within ASEAN, Vietnam differs from Singapore, from Malaysia, as an example. But I've been so blessed with an abundance of learnings and experiences that, has informed my leadership style, that has informed how I think about scaling businesses, building teams, and has informed, what I want to do in life in terms of what my purpose is as a leader and a human being.
Wow. Harris, your phenomenal career and the aspiration for growth that you introduced to us in less than 3 minutes. So we're gonna dive in together to understand more about the journey, so that the listener of the show can find something that they can reflect, learn, and apply. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I like to try to travel back in time. When I was a little boy, I wanted to become an astronaut and travel to a different planet. Seems so cool, but life didn't give me any chance to doing so. So you were born in Malaysia, but then start to live in Singapore, right after that, right? We want to understand, when you were young, what was your dream about your future, though?
When I was young, and it wasn't just when I was young, it went on to my teenage years. My dream was to play professional football. I wanted to be a professional footballer. That was
Like
my
the soccer.
absolutely, yeah,
Uh-huh.
absolutely. That was my dream. And and I obviously was a little difficult when I was younger because I was not in the physical shape I needed to be to play, serious football. But over time, I got into good shape, through a lot of hard work, and I got a call. I got the call up from the Football Association of Singapore to join the national under 23 squad training for the pre-Olympics. which was my footballing highlight. But that was very short-lived because I kind of tore my ACL, and I think that was the start of the end for me in terms of my footballing dreams because of injuries to my knees and so on and so forth. And yeah, and so I kind of happened to accidentally find my way into technology, and I couldn't be more happy for my career. It's in spite of not being able to play football professionally, but I watch football now, and I still enjoy the game.
All right, sorry for the injury, but sometimes life take us, to a new directions, and that new direction sometimes is we don't know how life takes us, right? I
Agree.
Yeah, I want to bring you back to the time when you was at Singapore Airlines at the if I wrote it here correctly, it's the flight steward, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and at that moment you worked there for a little while, and you just realize that it's not gonna, you're not happy with that you want to do something more, and that took you to the retail operation, then took you to another 19 years of amazing year with Microsoft, right? I want to bring you to the moment when that fly steward wasn't happy about the career that he had. What was in your mind back then, though?
It's interesting. When you're young, you tend to think, I think in more simplistic terms. It's less complicated in terms of how you make a decision versus as you get older,
Mm.
and you get more experience and more educated, and we tend to over-engineer sometimes our thought process. And I think at that time when I was flying, I actually loved the experience. I met some amazing people, but there was something in that experience that didn't resonate with me.
Mm.
And people were, I didn't have control of my life because, when you're in Singapore, you're on standby, and you're here in a short period of time. And, when my friends were out, my family were having birthday parties and stuff, and I had to fly off because I had to work, right? So, and when I was young, that was a sense of emptiness I had. And I think uh, at some point I didn't want that emptiness. I
Oh.
wanted a little bit more control of my life, and in terms of my schedules and so on. So I said, look, this is not the kind of life I want to build for the future.
Mm.
So I actually took a 70% pay cut when I left Singapore Airlines to start my own business, which is a massive pay cut to take, but I didn't think twice. And like I
Ah.
said, when you're young and sometimes you're foolish and you make decisions like what I did, I have no regrets. But on hindsight, as I think about that decision, and I'm like, how did I make would I make a decision of like that now? The answer is no. But obviously different time and place. But yeah, so that's how I ended up. I just basically said, this is not for me. I closed that door, and I jumped on and I opened another door, and I went to try something new, and it worked out really well.
Was there anybody that you talked to when you decided to leave, that job and then starting your own retail business?
Honestly, no. I mean, I did it. It was just me, and at that time my girlfriend, who's my wife now,
Oh.
I discussed it with her, but like I said, I was young, and you could argue naive and foolish, and I did that. And when I started my own business, it wasn't a retail business.
Mm.
I joined a retail company, a professional company separately. But when I started my own business, I had an idea, and I wanted to try that idea. So that's
Mm.
why I left Singapore Airlines, and I started my own business, which was selling high-end cameras to Japan. So I
Oh.
was I was sourcing high-end cameras like Leica and Hasselblad from the distributors in Singapore, and I was selling it to Japan. So I was cold calling customers in Japan. In those days, we had fax machines, and then offering prices, of the cameras I had, and I
Ah.
was competing, with other distributors from Japan, and I won a bunch of deals, and I started to grow that business. It became really interesting.
And how did Microsoft figure out you and then invite you to join the organization that led into the 19 plus years that you had with successful
Well,
years with Microsoft though.
well, when I was in the retail company, I worked with my boss, and we built a business model that drove the convergence of IT retailing and consumer retailing. So
Mm,
the traditional consumer retailing shops sold white goods, they sold TVs, they sold hi-fis, they sold all the gadgets and appliances. That that retail consumer model was evolving because consumerism was also growing for technology products. So
mm,
we drove the convergence of that model because we saw that consumerism piece in technology coming into play. We wanted our shops to sell those technology products.
mm,
However, what I learned was the technology business model for retail is very different from the consumer electronics business model for retail. So building that convergence saw us, introduce and partner with a leading local retailer who was a very big consumer retailer, and they then integrated IT into it. And I built a business model that allowed for that to happen. I brought a lot of the big technology giants on the table together with the IT, with the retailer, and we built a business model that worked for both parties. And
mm.
that kind of took off really well. And I think that's where Microsoft said, "Hey, why don't you come and run our consumer business? We need help there as well." So, and I did.
Wow, wow. Harris, how could you be able to see things differently, so that you can create something new that works for, if I look back at the, when you work at the retail business, right? And you source for high-end cameras to sell to Japan market, where market in Japan already have companies that doing the same works as you do, and then all you could do is to cold call them and fax and stuff. And I believe back then the ability to speak English for Japanese people over there was also, limited also. So you chose the hard thing instead of selling it in Singapore market, and you sell it to Japan market. And the same thing that you do in the consumer and the IT conversion, and create something new. So how were you able to see things differently so that you can create a business model that works?
It's an interesting question, and I think a couple of things. One is I think traveling really opened up my mind. Traveling at that age was probably one of the best things I
Mm,
did for myself. It was the kind of education I got that a classroom would never give me.
mm,
So I traveled the world. I got out of Singapore. Singapore was a great country, very safe, very organized, and I got out of Singapore, and I saw the world, and that kind of broadened my mind, my perspective, about how people live, how people market, how people buy, behaviors, and so on and so forth. And I went to Japan, and I went to some places in Japan, and I saw how people were buying and understanding the models over there, and it was just phenomenal for me just to learn about all of that. And then obviously through my own networks and relationships, I
mm,
learned about the availability of these kind of cameras in Singapore.
mm,
And you do some homework and you realize there's a big market of Japanese people buying these cameras because they love taking pictures. So
mm.
you understand that side. And then you realize that the economics buying from a distributor in Singapore and shipping it to Japan, because of the economics, the pricing, two, the exchange rates, there's an arbitrage. There's a good profit margin to be made. So when you
Ah,
put all of that together, you're like, hey, that could be an interesting business. And that's what ended up happening. So this is before the days of the .com. So I started this business. Someone funded me and underwrote my idea, and then I built it out.
beautiful, beautiful. A lot of people travel, Harris. All right. And a lot of people travel, they see the, the favorite places, they took photos, they took video, and they get home and tell the stories. But your way of travel is different. You try to understand the behavior of consumers and stuff like that. So every time you travel, you teach us what is your take home, that you put on your notes, put on your minds about the place that you visit, though.
And look, I don't have a magic formula or anything like that. I think I'm curious, and it's something I had to work on. It's not like I was born curious.
Mm,
And I think being curious and trying to ask some basic questions of how things work in a country can really be very enlightening.
mm,
When you ask those questions of from people who live there, and that's the what I tend to do. I
mm,
think over time reading helps a lot as well.
mm.
I think over time, just talking to people, and trying to and listening to understand versus listening to respond can be very powerful in the process.
Mm.
I think over a period of time, for me, I've come to the conclusion that we're all different people. You're different, I'm different. You grew up in Vietnam, your set of experiences is different. I grew up in Singapore, my set of experiences is different. A viewer watching this growing up in, I don't know, some parts of Europe, his or her experience is going to be different. But the
Yeah,
one thing that connects all of us from across the world is our humanity,
yeah.
right? So we might come from different places, but we're all bounded by our humanity, right? So we're all good people. We're all trying to create a life. We're all trying to do right, do good, make a difference. So, but how we do it based on our experiences, based on our biases, and so on and so forth, is what drives us. So for me, trying to understand what exactly that is and how it works for every individual around the world in different cultures is what I try to do. And what it does for me is it helps me transcend my biases, my upbringing, my experiences to connect with people across the globe. So it's
Be-
great for me to build relationships. It's also great for me in terms of how I get things done.
Beautiful. Thanks a lot for sharing that because uh, I plan to ask you when you say that you weren't curious, and then it's a learning for you to get to be curious. Right? Thanks for sharing that. I interview a lot of business leaders around the world, Harish, and when by the time that they retire, there's two things that they they are not happy with themselves. One was starting their business because they've been able to run in a lot of organizations successfully, but they always wanted to run their own organizations, but they didn't do that. They're yet doing that, put it that way. Okay. And then the second thing is writing a book themselves. And they're yet doing that also. So I want to say congratulate you for writing the book, Grow by Choice. We want to ask you, you know, what motivates you to write that book. Can you share with us?
Yeah, sure. Look, I had there were two main reasons, right? The fragility of life, I think during COVID was, I think, brought to the front and center for everyone around the world. We saw how fragile life can be. And I think there are many experiences we go through where we see close ones, loved ones, passing away at very young ages. So the fragility of life kind of made it real for me.
Mm,
And I believe that the world is changing in ways we don't know or we can't see. And we saw a recent example. Everyone's talking about AI and ChatGPT and how that's going to change the world and so on and so forth, right? But that's, I think, just the tip of the iceberg. So with the world changing as fast as it is, and we going into territories we don't know, the thing for me is, how do my kids thrive in this world of change?
mm,
And so I wanted to capture my voice so that in the event I go, my kids would have something they could read and they could understand my point of view. I'm not saying I'm right, but it's a point of view, it's a perspective. So I wanted to capture my voice for my children. So when I
mm.
wrote my book, my worst case scenario was three people would read my book, my wife and my two kids. That was also an assumption. Okay, that was my worst case scenario. The other reason I wrote the book was because I've been involved in a lot of transformation and disruption work, and during my time at Microsoft. And what was interesting in the course of doing that was a lot of people, when they get disrupted, continue to be incredibly shocked and surprised. And I become pretty surprised that they are surprised. And so my question is, there's so much literature out there that talks about how the world is changing and the world is getting disrupted. All right. You look at all the books behind you, there's a lot of literature out there that telling you that if you know that the world is changing and you're going to get disrupted, the question then for me is, why are we not owning our disruption on our terms and disrupting ourselves on our terms so that we can thrive in a world of change versus waiting to be disrupted and hoping we survive?
Beautiful.
So that's the other question I had, and I wanted to write a book to basically provoke, unlock, and inspire people, provoke thought by asking questions, unlock insights through the stories, and inspire action through the different contents of the book coming together so that people will start to own their own disruption so that they don't think about surviving, they think about thriving.
Wow, beautiful. But in our human evolutions, right? It's encoded in our DNA is that being surviving seems to be predominantly, in our way of living than being thriving and being, like growing, because so so how can we break that code and take a baby steps, Haresh, to go into the path that we can own the disruption, then being surviving in the change though.
Look, it's a really profound question, and I don't know whether I'm the right person to answer that question. But I'll share a perspective. I think there are many other historians and futurists out there who talk about this in their own ways. But in my perspective, it's a combination of finding your happiness, what makes you happy. It's about self-awareness, and then it's about accountability to yourself. And I think, when we go on this chase for more money because we want a bigger house, a bigger car, and we want title, we want power, when we go after this chase, there is a conscious or unconscious trade-off we make through all the decisions we take. And what I'm trying to get people, I would love for people to do more of, is to make conscious choices in the trade-offs they make. Because when you are going after more money and bigger titles and bigger jobs, you have to also make sure you understand who you are and find out what fuels you. Because going after more money and bigger jobs and bigger titles may not necessarily be what makes you happy. Right? So then the question is, what makes you happy? Do we know what makes you happy? Are we self-aware enough to understand what keeps the fire in our belly lit? That is important, because I think if we know what makes us happy, we can then go in pursuit of things much bigger. We can then go in pursuit of impact much bigger in very meaningful ways, right? By playing the long game and not the short game. Most of us play growth as a short game. We say by 30, I need to make X, or by 35, I need to own Y. And if you think about the long game and you play growth for the long game, I think there's an opportunity to rethink what growth means to you and how do you drive growth over the long period versus playing it for the short period. And I think for me, that's what I did unintentionally, potentially. That's what I did for myself. And I want to encourage, now hindsight is 2020. So I want to encourage a lot of other people now to think about growth as a long game and play that long game. Because when you play that long game, you can potentially, and then you focus on self-awareness, You can then potentially find your happiness. You can
Mm,
then potentially translate that into meaningful actions you take to play the long game to enable
mm.
your growth.
Harris, because you say that that was you were able to do that, okay? And while there's a lot of people were not able to do that because they've been still chasing, things out there. When they get into the treadmill, then they keep running, 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 title to the next title, money to the next money, achievements to the next bigger achievements. And you're able to find the path, still grow in the long term. When you're still growing, but take the long term at the end, and then walk that way up, right? Can you share with us what happened when you get into that realizations about change, though?
I think everything starts with, do you know who you are? Do you know yourself? This concept of self-awareness is incredibly powerful. And
Mm,
I think many of us don't give enough time to ourselves. We don't create enough space for ourselves to go discover who we are and learn who we are.
mm,
And knowing yourself is a lot of responsibility, because once you know, you got to do something about it,
yeah.
right? And some people maybe sweep it under the carpet, right? I don't want to know. It's easier for me not to know, right? Ignorance is bliss, as they say, right? But very early in my career in Microsoft, I struggled when I joined Microsoft because I've never worked in a professional IT company. So when I joined Microsoft, I didn't have any technology background. My background was more strategy, marketing, business management. And when I joined Microsoft, I just struggled. I struggled to collaborate. I struggled, and the definition of success for me was about I succeed and no one else. I was
Mm,
very competitive. I still am. But I think I got feedback one day that told me something about myself.
mm,
And the feedback forced, it was very tough to get that feedback because it obviously hurt my ego at that time. But the feedback gave me two choices. One is I don't listen and I say I'm right, that person is wrong, and I ignore it and I continue down my path. And then the other piece was, oh my God, if that's how I'm being perceived, that's not who I want to be. And I'm
mm.
gonna change and take a different path. Lucky for me, at a young age, I told myself, if that's how I'm getting perceived, that's not who I want to be. So
Oh,
the reality of how I was being perceived and the awareness that that's not what I want to be were a compelling force for me to take a new path. And that's how I started to turn around and work on my evolution over time, because I was very clear that's not who I want to be.
mm,
Right. And it was tough. It was very tough. It was brutal, but it was good because that allowed me to take a new path and it allowed me to get the help I needed in order for me to grow to become a better version of myself over time. And
mm,
after that, I just continued to build a learning mindset. So I became curious. I was keen to get feedback so I can learn. And I would have this internal battle with me with regards to having the awareness, but having the awareness of what I might not be doing well, and then fighting with it with my pride and learning how to manage my pride so that I can be humble enough to
mm.
ask for help, to take action, to grow.
Beautiful. And thanks for sharing that personal, stories of change, Harris. Then got back to the book. If the book is you write the books first, it's for if it's for the three first audience. This is your wife and your two kids, right? And eventually, it help people to. It's really helpful for people to change because I wrote in here is for them to create their own disruption instead of being disrupted and tag along with the change, right? So if you pick one chapter in the book that you really like and you want to share with us, so now what would that chapter be?
It's that's a really hard. No one's asked me that. I like all the chapters. There's no one chapter I have a bias towards, and I think I think like I said, when I wrote the book, I'm not saying we won't get disrupted. I
Mm,
think all of us will get disrupted. I think the idea is, how do you ride the waves of change with more grace, composure, and confidence versus, the complete opposite, right? And I think the book is basically meant to help guide folks to think about what's holding them back,
mm,
learning about themselves in order for them to turn around and be inspired to want to take action, right? And then that's why I took a storytelling approach to the book. And I think, the I liked all the chapters, so I'm not going to say, there's one chapter or the other. I introduced some frameworks that I think can be useful for people and for teams and organizations. But at the same time, I think there are a lot of human stories,
mm,
because the reality is, when we think about business disruption, there's so much conversation about business disruption, business model disruption, technology and innovation, but there's not enough conversation around personal disruption. And that's my point. If a business needs to disrupt, the business must also enable personal disruption, because organizations are made of people.
mm.
You need people, right? And as much as we might think about AI and technology taking over, in some instances, I think it will, but there are many other instances it will complement human ingenuity. But at the end of the day, you're dealing with people. And that's always been my leadership philosophy, right? So for me, you know, all the chapters are meaningful. The last chapter obviously uh, is very close to my heart. And if you read my book, you will know why the last chapter is incredibly close to my heart.
Absolutely, absolutely. I will order and then I read the last chapter more than the rest of the chapter. Is that your advice to me?
No, no, that's not my advice to you. My advice to you, I think you should read the entire book, because it's a
Uh-huh.
it's a journey of a bunch of different stories and perspectives. Yeah.
Mm. The each interview like this, we want to have some call for action, some advices. So if you can pick some advices from the book, one or two, and share in this conversation, so our audience can learn something new for them. What would be that? If those few things.
Yeah, look, I'd say the book doesn't tell you the how. The
Ah,
book the book forces you to ask a bunch of questions
ah,
that can open up and hopefully raise the conscious mind. So, if you're ready to turn around and ask yourself some difficult questions so that you can learn more about yourself, and then you want to get inspired to walk a path of owning your own growth and disruption, this is the book for you, right? So I think that's something for every reader to turn around and take. uh,
mm,
I've had feedback on the book, which I'm incredibly grateful for. There's a lot out there. uh, but I think the book has resonated with different people in different ways, which is the intention, based on where individuals are on their life journey.
ah,
And where you are, where I am, we're in different phases of our life. So that when we read the book, we will take away different things and answer the questions in very different way, the same question. So I'd say, if you're ready to go through that journey, this is the book for you. I'd say the other thing about the book, which would be great, would be there are some frameworks in the book that I think could be useful for people as they think about what growth is. How do I think about my growth? Many of us, when we think about growth, we think about hard skills. We think about um, uh, learning, going for certifications, or taking on stretch projects, or getting a mentor, and all. All of that is great. But there are other aspects of growth I think we need to pay attention to, and the book talks about that as well. And then the last thing I think what the book does is it takes you on a journey of stories you know um that will connect your head and your heart.
ah,
In life, it's not just about the head, it's also about the heart. it's not only about the heart, it's also about the head. So how do you find balance between the two? In the book, I think engages everyone across the head and the heart. And I hope it is a book that can be reread from time to time, and it's a book that will provide good will inspire action for folks. So I'd say these are the three things I'd say what the book could do for you, and I think it'll be hopefully a good read for many.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have two last questions for this conversation. All right. So during our conversation with over 600 experts around the world, we always end up asking this question. My wife and I believe that thinking is important, and this is a starting point for all the change, positively or negatively. Okay. And and we want the people to change positively. So each chance that we got to talk to expert like you, we want to ask this question: how have you been helping you to grow your thinking over the years?
So firstly, I'm not an expert. Thank you though for the term, but I think I'm always learning. I work with very smart people every day. I have a firm belief that everyone has an inner genius. I think you have an inner genius. I have an inner genius. I think a lot of people around me have an inner genius, and an inner genius is something that's unique to her. And I am always on a path to want to discover what your genius is, because if I can understand what your genius is, I can then partner with you to do some amazing things going forward. Because I'm very clear, I don't know everything, and I'm not the smartest guy in the room. But I'm very clear, I think there are a lot of other people out there who are incredibly bright, and I'm trying to either unlock that for them, or I'm trying to discover it so that I can learn from them. And that's what I want to do every single day as a leader, and that's how I want to stay sharp, and that's how I want to grow.
Wow, thanks a lot. The last question is about the future. All right. So we've been traveling in the past. We understand, your dream as teenager is to become a, professional footballer, right? And then the injury took you to a different path, and that path took you to another beautiful way, growth, put it that way. And now we travel to the future a little bit. Is there anything exciting you are working on and you want to share with me and the audience so that we can celebrate with you in advance?
Hey, I don't know what the future holds, but I know it's going to be exciting. And I'm excited for a variety of reasons. I'm excited because I think the evolution and innovation in technology is going to create new paths for many people. There are elements of it that they're going to be scary because they're unknowns for sure. That's only natural. I'm excited about that. I'm excited for my kids. My kids, I'm seeing my kids grow up. And obviously I'm biased, and they're incredibly bright. And I think the world is their oyster. So I can't wait, to see what my kids do. And I can't wait to see what I can do with my kids at the same time. So, my kids and I are talking about a bunch of stuff we want to do together in the future. And lastly, I know why I exist. I know why I do what I do, and I'm hoping I can continue to build on my purpose that fuels me, so that I can potentially make a micro dent in the areas that I operate in, and hopefully I get to make a micro dent that transcends cultures, transcends borders, transcends age groups, transcends beliefs, so that we can genuinely unite humanity, regardless of where we come from.
Wow, I'm excited for that journey next, for the near future that you are doing. And Harris, I'm excited to see your family in Vietnam also. All right. So if you guys travel here, let us know. If I travel to Singapore for, on personal or for works, I
Please
would
let me
love to
know.
have a
Yes.
coffee with you and your family together also. Either
Please.
way. Okay. All right.
Please, let me know as well. But thank you so much for being incredibly kind and persistent, and giving me a chance to be on your podcast.
Thank you very much for spending your morning with us and be so kind to share your stories. You have a wonderful day, and I love to see you in person soon. Okay.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Ha.
Thank you very much.
All
Bye
right,
bye.
take care. See ya. Bye.
Bye.